So how has your week been so far?
A lot of homework.
That's a shock. I hope you've been having a good week. We're getting up close to another month. So we are almost a quarter of the way through our term already. On one hand, that's kind of exciting. On the other hand, that's a little bit scary.
Yes, it
That's
is.
this is one of those classes where sometimes you think it should go by a lot faster, and sometimes it goes by way too fast. But that well, today I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the confusion I've been getting emails for. Hey, Reed, and if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask them. We're probably not going to go as rapidly through information as we did last week, uh, but I I'm trying to make sure I answer questions that people are emailing so we can get them covered. There is one concern. A couple of people have mentioned that there were questions that were asked in one part of a module that, and they were confused as to where to turn the answers in. And when something like that happens, this class is designed also for an in-person situation. Excuse me. And I'm trying really hard to make sure that I've gotten everything covered for the online as well. And if it does seem confusing, the only thing that you guys are ultimately responsible for is what the individual's assignment says to turn in. And so if it does ask you questions, that is generally going to be for on class discussion if we have the time to have that kind of a discussion. So hopefully that makes it a little bit less confusing, but it probably won't. That's fine. I did also wanted to ask, where do you guys find recordings of the class time that we have together?
I don't know. I'm always at the meetings.
Okay. To get credit for attendance, you got to go to the attendance module. And for each week, that week we'll have the recording for our class, usually within an hour or two after our class, as soon as I can get it uploaded onto YouTube. So even if you do attend in person, you'll still need to go to the attendance module and go in there. It's a simple question where it's just like list three things you learned, and then you get credit for attendance. The other side effect is I have found that people that attend the live version are consistently getting A's in this class every time I've taught it. So that's not exactly extra credit, but it is a nice benefit. So when you guys get off of this call or off of this Teams meeting, as soon as you can, go over to um, the attendance module. I think it's the top module, and scroll down and go to the week for today. And I think I start the week on Mondays, so it'll be the week of January 23rd, and then just write down the three things you learned from this meeting, and then you'll get credit for attendance. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. And Reed, I know how excited you are about these kinds of things. I don't know if anybody else knows, but Reed usually likes to watch the videos at least 3 or 4 times after we do the live session, and you can feel free to do that too. It just goes up about an hour or two after the live session is over.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, this all of us have that. In my case, it was a great aunt, but she was through marriage, so there's no genetic link. That would always just assume that creative people are born that way, and that's it. You can't become creative. And she would dismiss anybody that was a little out of whack or a little bit odd as being artistic, and just say, well, yeah, they're not like me. And I think that's pretty sad. Have either of you had an opportunity to skim over this week's module?
Oh,
I have not looked at it.
Okay. One of the things it talks about, well, the primary thing is creativity. And there's a couple, we talk about convergent and divergent ways of addressing issues, something called slow motion multitasking, which I really like. And you guys are already doing it without knowing that it's the sign of the intellectual elite. And talking about just some ideas of where you can go to or what you can do to expand your own creativity. Now, there is some evidence that there are some elements of creativity that might be in a family, but I would really hesitate to say that you can prove that anybody could prove that it's a common genetic trait that makes the people creative. You know, if there's a creative family, kids are going to be born into that environment. They're going to be raised in this creative atmosphere. So, of course, they're going to have more creativity. So, I think it's less of a genetic trait and more of a happy family environment trait. There are one of the reasons for this assumption, I think, also was the idea of the guild system in Europe. And there's elements or parallels to the guild system all around the world and have been for thousands of years, where people are brought into an enclave of artists or a particular style of art or a particular medium use and grow up going through the ranks of understanding and application of the principles specifically for that medium or that guild. Like one of the most famous is the Masonic guilds. Um, Masonry was absolutely huge during the religious construction of the Middle Ages, and the people that joined these communities or were members of these guilds, they didn't have jobs like what we have. I mean, they were sometimes these cathedrals would take generations to build, and so it wasn't a work that they would go to. It was more of an environment that they were part of, and you're around that all the time. Somebody gives you a task and says, "We have a window that needs to go here. Design something uh, with topology that fits this scripture for that window," and the artist, there'd be a mason who would have to carve out the frame from stone. There'd be another guy who would have to figure out how to support and strengthen the window. Another set of artists that would do the stained glass work. Or say, well, we need a chair for a bishop. We want it to be. We have this much money to spend on it. The bishop is probably going to be this size. Go to it, and that would be the direction. So they would. It was more of an environment of creativity out of necessity. Now, I'm just talking about European guild systems, but we see this echoed all around the world. Like in Turkey, there were the parallels to the guilds where people would do different things. There would be the dye guild where people would be working with cloth. There would be the rug guild where people would be doing specific weaving for rugs and the design work there. And a lot of those are still alive and well today from Turkey and Iran. Um, and we can kind of see that. And different other guilds have faded away and are coming back, like miniature painting or literary painting is one guild like that. Poetry, believe it or not, poetry in the Middle East and Far East was a big guild and is still. In Indonesia, there are people that are rock stars for reciting poetry and reading scripture, and they will read scripture live to stadiums filled with tens of thousands of people. Can you believe that?
I mean, poetry is kind of a cooler concept because it's creativity in its purest form of trying to string together items practically, and it's been around for forever.
Yeah, and it's what I find refreshing is that today everything is so information and entertainment is so easily consumable on your own time. It's exciting to me to know that there is a 19-year-old woman in Indonesia who recites the Quran and does it in front of sold out crowds all the time. I just think that it's cool to live in a world where that's a real thing. But there's three things I wanted to touch on. And Reed, I really liked your description of poetry. That's excellent. Um, is there an inherent need to be creative? Can we practice creativity? And the third thing is there's an assignment to learn about 80 different artists. Now, you're not going to learn about 80 different artists. You're only going to learn about 20 of them. But it's a list of artists, and we'll describe what the rapid research project is for that in just a bit. I wanted to ask this question: is there an inherent need to be creative? If we look back to when we were talking about art in the previous weeks, art is basically any time that you create something that didn't exist in that way before. Do you think that there is an inherent need for human beings to be creative?
I think if you're not creative, uh, being as creative is the attitude of creating things practically. If you never create anything, you'll never move beyond what you have. And I think that'll be a necessity because then the world would evolve faster than we would, and we'd all die.
I really like that perspective too. You know, what in my family, there's been several people who have suffered from clinical depression. What is one of the first things do you think that people who suffer from clinical depression talk about as that is a principal symptom? You know, from the context of our discussion, you probably guess it's the lack of desire to do anything, to build anything, to create anything. I mean, you can smile outwardly, you can joke around, you can have fun with people, but there's something hollow and empty inside of you where you don't have that desire to make something. And you know, anytime we go into an new apartment, even anytime you go camping, even one of the first things you do is change the environment to build it into something new, so it becomes your space. And that's regardless, I think, of who you are. It's very rare that somebody who is healthy and mentally adapted, that they're not going to have a desire to at least change their environment to suit themselves or to be happier within at least a little bit. Now there's so I think the question, instead of is everybody creative, it's, you know, can we see different levels of creativity in the people around us? And I think that's absolutely true. It's not just people. It seems that there's orders of animals that are creative as well. Like there's some very cool stuff on octopuses who are creative, and other primates, in addition to humans, that are creative. Um, there's some argument that we can be made that there's even some birds that are creative, which I think is kind of interesting. But that desire to build something new is one of those things that helps. I think that helps us to claim our humanity. You know, when we combine it with other things. Now, another question is, can we practice being creative? And we absolutely can. That's one of the reasons for the existence of this class. And people will say, well, I'm just not creative. I just can't do it. And cut themselves off from any opportunity for success because they don't even want to try. That can be pretty sad because they fail to understand that even the capacity of being able to appreciate what other people do is an aspect of creativity as well. There are two primary kinds of creativity. One is divergent and one is convergent. The difference is convergent, it means essentially coming together. That is the kind of creativity that somebody like Sherlock Holmes um, exhibited. I sure hope both of you guys know who Sherlock Holmes is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. The world's greatest detective that never existed. Absolutely. He used a process that his literary creator described as ratiocination, which is basically reasoning. And it's based on um, a number of Greek philosophers posited the idea that from a cup of water, you could rationalize an ocean. This idea that reasoning, when correctly applied, could give you the initial causes of things and allow you to develop a framework of information that other people may not have access to because they're not paying attention, maybe, that allows you to solve problems in what appears to be a creative way. And it is creativity. So Sherlock Holmes could tell that Dr. Watson fought in Afghanistan because of the lack of pallor of his skin. He had a suntan, and the limping he did was particular to a leg wound that was field treated. And that's both in the new TV series from BBC that came out a few years ago, but also in the original stories about Sherlock Holmes. And that's how he solves his cases, by backward reasoning. I think that's a good example of something that's like convergent reasoning, where is basically you're given a problem, you know what is you should be doing to achieve the solution, and then you work in a relatively straight line to achieve the solution. Uh, some elements of computer programming are very much like this. Some elements of writing are very much like this. Now, what kind of separates this from divergent thinking is that convergent is generally everybody can get the path. The path is pretty straightforward to the solution. Once John Watson heard how Sherlock Holmes came to his conclusions, it made perfect sense because it was all based on straight line reasoning from subtle observation. Now, divergent thinking, that is, if convergent is straight line, what do you think divergent is?
Maybe splitting, maybe taking the main idea and branching off from it.
Exactly. Yeah. This is where things like brainstorming come in. This is, have you seen those thought diagrams? There's a lot of brainstorm or thought diagramming software that you can get where it just kind of helps you to throw ideas up on a wall and then kind of coalesce them. This is what the kinds of things that a poet will do. It's very, somebody who's writing an essay may or may not be more of a convergent thinker, but somebody who's a poet really likes to express ideas with combinations of words that maybe people haven't thought of before. So they're thinking through lots of different ways for expressing something and then finding the things that stick. And there's been a number of studies that find that if you do a brainstorming session, I'm assuming both of you guys do know what brainstorming is, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Addison, can you give you a quick example of brainstorming?
Writing down a bunch of ideas.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And the reason why this is divergent is because, like Reed said earlier, it is not a straight line to the solution of a problem. And what's interesting is that when people do brainstorm, a lot of the times it opens up new channels of ideas that people are shutting down themselves before the ideas even get out of their heads. And a lot of the times the best solutions come towards the end of the brainstorming session, which makes sense because you're trying to open up a door for out of the box type thinking. And when you do that, it's usually the straight line suggestions that are the first ones out. So that does kind of make sense. But there's an article to talk about that it kind of addresses this in a sideways way, and a video to watch. And the article deals with smartphones and how device addiction may be curtailing our propensity for creativity. I think intelligent device use does the exact opposite, but we all have that friend who, any spare moment, they're going to be on their phone, and if you ask them what they were doing, they won't even be able to remember because such a small part of their concentration is involved in flipping through the phone that it's become a device for amusement or to stave off boredom rather than anything else. And there's a actual there's an actual affectation that people can be diagnosed with called device addiction. My children, my youngest had this, where she could not sleep at all unless that the phone screen was glowing somewhere in the room. She's gotten better, but there's other issues that it affects as well. Like, do you know? Do either of you have friends that have broken up with a boyfriend or girlfriend because uh, there was no punctuation on the text messages?
No, but I have had people get annoyed at me because of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's easy to see. Or quick fire email responses. It's very rare that people take the time anymore to review an email and edit it before they send it off, or a text even. And I've been in friendships that had some strain because I was thought I was being funny in a text when the lack of tonal value or punctuation really made it sound like I was being the biggest jackass in the world, which, was not necessarily my intention. Sometimes that just happens. Now, how can we reclaim creativity? If we do feel that it's kind of slipping away because we are becoming addicted to our devices, how can we reclaim it? I think a really quick way to do is targeted research on the internet. That's kind of a fun thing. Um, Doing research with your device on Google or something like that, where you just start looking up something interesting and kind of follow it through. See if you can develop a thesis about what you're examining. I like to do this with fun stuff with my kids, like anything from Atlantis, Bigfoot, um, Yowie, to research on traditional Maori tattoo, pyramids in, name a country. Um, I haven't seen a lot of evidence for man-made pyramids in Australia, but even doing a little bit of internet research, you find out that there's a rock wall that was found in Australia that looks like it was ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs were carved on it over 3,000 years ago. And there are people that say it's fake, but there are other people that say it's legitimate. And what's fascinating is 3,000 years ago, or there are 3,000-year-old records in Egypt that talk about a group of people that sailed into the East um, and came back after meeting some very unusual people that they had become friends with. And so, maybe those two things are related. And that's the kind of thing that helps to spark interest, which then relates to sparking creativity. What are some other things that you can do that kind of reclaim your creativity or spark your interest?
If you're in like the same setting, like I know for some it might be like a daily routine of going to the school, going home, going to the school, going home. If you want to like get more thoughts or ideas, you could always branch out and maybe walk at night, look at things, just go and expand like what you see every day and what you'll think about.
Well, that is excellent. That is very good. What's another thing, Addison?
I don't know. I usually like to go like work out and that to like get more with it.
Okay, I think both of those are really good because read changing your environment uh, does affect how you think and it changes that. And Addison, working out increases the oxygen flow to your brain and helps you to think more clearly and gives you the energy you need. Both of those are excellent ideas. Now, the video talks about something called slow motion multitasking. I have heard a number of different things over the years about multitasking. About 20 years ago, it was all the rage. People knew they could do it. What is actually going on when you think you're multitasking? Do do you either of you know?
I would say you can never truly multitask on like the same thing. Like if you've ever tried to listen to two person and music at the same time, you can never truly do that. I would say it would be maybe possible to multitask by listening to music and seeing and doing something, maybe like homework. I'd say that'd be a sort of multitasking, but something that would like be doing the same tasks with the same items um, wouldn't really be possible.
Yes, that's exactly right. What is actually going on is that your brain is switching from task to task. If you are listening to music that you need to pay attention to or focus on, and you're trying to talk to somebody that you also need to focus on, your brain switches back and forth, and it actually makes it more difficult to understand either one because your brain has to essentially switch gears. But if you're listening to music that you do not have to focus on, the rhythms of the music actually help your brain to focus on other activities. So usually instrumental music is better, or music where the vocals become essentially or functionally an element of the instrumental portion. So you don't really have to focus on it. That's very good. Um, there is something that this guy, he kind of laughingly calls it slow motion multitasking, but he talks about it. And this is something that truly intelligent people do quite a bit. And what is fascinating to me is all of you guys are doing it. Well, you know, you're in university. This is something that you're trained to do. So this is you have joined, even if you don't consider yourself to have joined the exclusive club. You guys have joined the um, intellectual elite because you are already practicing slow motion multitasking. That is, you're taking multiple classes at university. You probably also have a job or other thing that you're responsible for, but you're doing several different activities pretty much at the same time. Not quite. You're shifting your perspective from one to another. And as you're going, you're also making decisions, coming to conclusions, and solving problems with each of those different within each of those different spheres by using information that you've gained from your other parallel experiences. Like for example, if you're taking this art class and you're also taking an engineering class or a nursing class, you're going to be able to use and adapt the tools of artistic critique, for example, to your other courses, so that the other assignments you'll approach them in a similar way using the tools of critical thinking you're learning from this class. Um, Conversely, you're also working on multiple projects. In the classes you're taking, you might be asked to write a couple. You might be asked to write an essay. You might be asked to do a research project. You might also be asked to do several short essay questions in preparation for different tests that you take. All those things kind of inform each other in your mind to help you to do a better job in each of them. I was in at BYU. I was taking a computer programming class, and I was taking a professional writing class. And I realized that the professional writing class was helping me to kind of clarify my programming, and the techniques that I had to use in order to make the program successful seemed naturally to fit into how I organized the writing. So they each of them informed each other. But one of the things he talks about is the year that Einstein released or published that famous E equals mc squared equation regarding the speed of light and energy and matter. He also released that same year three other papers that were just as instrumental in forming our thoughts about our present day thoughts about physics. So and they were all on different things. So he was able to multitask, but instead of trying to do them at the exact same time, he was hopping from one subject to another and allowing each to inform how he thought about the others. That is pretty much, Addison, wouldn't you think? That's pretty much a description of um, divergent thinking, isn't it?
Yes.
What different classes are you taking at the school?
English, exercise science, communications, a nursing class, and math.
Okay. Do you find that already in the beginning of the semester, each of them are informing how you think about the others?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? But being able to latch onto that and use that as a tool, um, cognizantly, or being aware of that capacity that you have, I think that awareness and being able to use it is the thing that helps us to develop creativity. Because a lot of the times we do it without even thinking about it. But when you guys become aware of how remarkable you are, I think that's when you can really start to take advantage of these tools that you're developing without necessarily being mindful of them. So think about that specifically as you move forward. What is interesting, this guy said, is that the typical professional in this kind of field, like physics or science, many of them are known for many of these luminaries are known for doing specific things and getting massive awards for. But he said that the average topic that these top level physicists and doctors and scientists address, you may think that they're limited to maybe five, six, seven that kind of relate to each other. But he said the average is at least 43 different topics that these people will write about and study over, a 30 or 40-year career. I think that's, and even at the end when they're supposed to be retiring at 65 or 70, they're still producing stuff. They're still, then they become mentors and they still do stuff. And that is part of what keeps the brain young, when the brain is continually interested in what it's doing and it's continually being engaged. Now, the assignments are pretty much self-explanatory, I think. I have had a couple people email and say the assignments are locked. The only reason why they get locked is because you have to go through each step of the module to be able to open up the assignment and do it. And one of the reasons I do that is to mitigate um, the propensity of questions that people ask before they get to the assignment. If you go through each of the elements of the module, that not only gives you the information that you need to complete the quiz successfully, but also it helps prepare you for the assignment and it makes more sense when you get to it. In this module, there are two assignments. One is a convergent thinking module that it's going to be interesting to see what people come up with. You basically look at the stuff in your house, look at the stuff that you have access to, think about a problem that you might be able to solve with that stuff, and then create something. This is also called an assemblage piece in the art world, but you're basically creating a model of a device or an invention that could solve a problem. One of the artists I want you to look up is a guy named Rube Goldberg, Rubegoldberg. His stuff, he made cartoons making fun of self-described inventors and engineers, where he's having people, there's just things do ridiculous um, routines in order to solve a problem. And some of his stuff, he's a function of his time, and he wrote a lot in the 40s and 50s and 60s. So some of the stuff might be a little bit offensive by our standards, but at the time, it was it was not considered offensive. But be mindful of that. If it is offensive, look up something else. And I apologize ahead of time. But Rube Goldberg is an excellent example of an artist who created stuff to solve problems creatively. And you've probably seen on Instagram or TikTok these things where people set up ridiculous inventions in their apartment to do absurd things, uh, go through all sorts of routines to get the blinds drawn over the window, for example. But that exercise, if you have issues about it, you remember that you get credit for following the directions and doing your best, not necessarily for how polished the final project is. Polish is not what you're being graded on. Uh, doing your best is pretty much. And I want you, as you work through the project, ask for opinions from your roommates, friends, and other people, and just not necessarily have follow them, but listen to them and see if they can incorporate, if you can incorporate any of what they say into what you're doing. See if that helps you. Excuse me. So it's basically an exercise on divergent creativity, where you're also pretty much collaborating with other people because you're trying to listen to them and work with the ideas that they're presenting to you. So it's more important to do the process rather than to submit a final invention that's perfect. And the second exercise is the artist list. And I want to go over that really quickly. The first thing you're going to do is come up with a list of 10 self identifiers. Like, for example, I'm 5'7, I have brown hair, my lineage is Slovenian, which is the smallest racial minority in the United States. Um, I really despise clipping my toenails. I like cinnamon, but I don't like um, really hot taco sauce. But I will travel 40 miles out of my way for a really nice taco. And I enjoy trying new foods any chance I get. Okay, identifiers like that. Now, you're never going to share that list with me. You're not going to share that with anybody else. After you write it down and use that to guide you for this assignment, you're going to burn it and throw it away. So that list is just for your eyes. And I want you to just keep it in the back of your mind as you're going through these artists. There are 85 artists on this list. There are 6 groups of like 8 to 10 artists each, and you're going to pick 2 artists from each of those groups. And there's a last group of artists that's like maybe 40 or so artists. And from that group, you're going to pick 8. And I don't really care which artists you do, but when you do your research, you're basically going to get on the internet. You're going to look up the artist name, and you're going to add the word art, do a search, an image search, and find something that resonates with you. And that image, you're going to write down what the title of it is and a 5 to 8 word description. For example, if we look up Praxiteles, and we see that he's a Greek sculptor. He does a lot of sculptures of um, naked people, and maybe one that we find is Aphrodite. So the name of the sculpture is Aphrodite, and the description of it is golden section sculpture of Aphrodite. And that's about as much as you're going to work as you're going to do. Then you're going to move on to the next artist. So that list of 10 self-identifiers that you come up with are things that are just going to be in your own head. As you go through this, the works that kind of resonate with you, I want you to be thinking, is there an artist that is different from you? And they could be different from any number of elements on that list of self-identifiers. If you're in your 20s, maybe the artist you like is Frank Gehry, who's in his 80s. If you're alive, maybe one of the artists you like is somebody who's died. If you live in the US, maybe one of the artists you like was born and still lives on the continent of Africa or in China, or anything like that. If you are Muslim, maybe the artist that you respond to, you find out is a Christian, so you want to find out more about them. But I want you to keep your mind open, and as you go through this list, look for an artist that resonates with you, because after you make that, uh, look up 20 artists and one work from each of the artists and write that down, you're also going to pick one of those 20 to do further research on in the next 3 months of the semester. And it's not going to be heavily involved research, but it's going to be something so you just learn a little bit more about that artist. And what you're going to be turning in is that rapid survey of 20 artists and their work, and one work for each of them, and your pick for the artist that you want to do further research on later on. And I list what kinds of things you're going to be doing for that, but you don't have to do anything other for this assignment. You don't have to do anything else other than submit those two elements for this review the artist list. Pardon me. Excuse me. Um, that's all you have to do for the submission for this other artists who express their creativity assignment. Does that make sense to both of you?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you think there are any potential questions somebody in the class might have about that second assignment or either assignment?
I can't think of any.
Okay. How about you, Addison?
I can't think of any either.
Okay. If there are questions that pop up, ask them like next week when we get together. But I try to make it as self-explanatory or as explanatory as possible within the structure of the assignment. you know, one other thing I wanted to mention was that for assignments that are a week or two old, I'm going to start putting zeros in for the grading area, and that's not because I'm going to be failing anybody. What that are failing you for not turning in the assignment is that is just to remind you that that assignment has not been turned in. And I've had a number of students who were very grateful for that because they thought on their system the assignment had turned in, but Canvas never finished. Um, I don't forget what's the word, logging it in. I guess there was an internet foul up or something like that. And sometimes there's been several students who submitted files that were that my computer could not read, and turning in a zero and just saying a little note there just reminded them to go back and uh, redo the files and resubmit it so that my computer could read it. So it's not. And do you guys remember how many times you can redo an assignment and when everything is due?
Isn't everything due at the end of the term?
Yes. Right. And how many
I don't
times can you
remember how many
redo an
times.
assignment? What's that?
I don't remember how many times.
You can keep redoing it until you get the grade you want.
Okay.
Okay. And that's pretty much how it works here. But yeah, everything is finally due at the end of the term, so you're not going to get late points docked off of anything. But I will start putting zeros on things like if for the first module, stuff that was due 2 weeks ago, if you see a zero, all that means is that you just need to go back and turn it in, and that's it. It does not mean you failed. All right.
Yeah.
I am. Thank you. I am just about done. Well, I am done. Do you guys have any final questions for me before we sign off and continue our weeks?
No, I don't.
How about you, Reed?
Yeah, same here. I think you explained everything super well.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, in that case, I'm going to sign off. I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing the fantastic stuff you invent and turn in. All righty?
All right. Thank you.
Sure
Yeah,
thing.
see
We'll
you.
see you next week.